welcome to this political, historical, and sociological channel. Today, the topic is about the only yes is yes, a law in Spain that criminal law professor Patricia Faraldo, who was one of the drafters of the new Spanish legislation, acknowledged that they were aware that some offenders could benefit from this law. The controversy surrounding this law continues in Spain after there have been nearly 300 reductions in sentence of offenders since it came into force in October 7th. Patricia Fallardo recognizes that this scenario was contemplated. She said, we knew that the penalties will be reduced. Yes, some because others increased notably. She said in an interview in La Opinión a Coruña, and she added, what we did not know was the reaction that the media will have to something that is absolutely normal in all criminal reforms. However, these reactive applications of the most beneficial rules for the prisoner give the executive immersed intentions between governments. The part of United Weekend, known as UP, to which the Minister of Equality, Irene Montero, promoter of the legislation, belongs, is in favor of no touching a comma, while the socialist side advocates retouching the regulation and increasing the penalties, something that would not solve the triplet of reduction due to the non-retroactive of the most painful laws for the convict. In recent days, the Minister of Equality has assumed that the reform will be carried out, although it insists that the problem lies in the incorrect application by a minority of judges. Faraldo explains in The Confidential that a new criminal type was created, merging the crimes of abuse and so that behaviors that were previously of little importance were included, which inevitably forced to lower the penalties somewhat. He also said that others were also increased, because a readjustment of all crimes was made. Thus, the sentence was lowered for some convicts and raised to others. But he emphasized that this scenario, they did not expect this media hype that she describes as absolutely disproportionate. Faraldo maintains that what is happening is within normal parameters, and that is the reaction of the media that gives the impression that only the penalties have been lowered, when at the same time they have been raised considerably in other criminal types. The professor maintains that the important thing for the protection of victims does not lie on severity of penalties, but in deploying as soon as possible the tools contemplated in the law and which are not yet financially endowed. This decalogue of measures contemplates a greater allocation of resources of the public prosecutor's office and security forces dedicated to women victims of violence or specialized psychological and psychiatric care for them, among others. In addition, the expert is against punitive populism and states that she is not in favor of increasing sentences, which are already the highest in Europe. For her, higher sentences are not synonymous with more protection, since criminals do not take them into account when breaking the law. Generally, they are unaware of them, she says. The Minister of Equality has also repeatedly expressed her opposition, although the reform proposed by the executive of Pedro Sanchez, as pointed out by the Minister of the Presidency, Felix Bolaños, goes in that direction, that of increasing penalties, which however cannot be applied retroactively. He also said that others were also increased, because a readjustment sentence was lowered for some conducts and raised for others. But he emphasized that in this scenario is disproportionate, This decalogue of measures contemplates a greater allocation of resources for the Public Prosecutor's Office and security forces dedicated to women victims of violence or specialized psychological and psychiatric care for them among others, and states that she is not in favor of increasing sentences, which are already the highest in Europe. For her, higher sentences are not synonymous with more protection, since criminals do not take them into account when breaking the law. Generally, they are unaware of them, she says. The new law was socially driven as a result of the case known as La Manada, the rape of an 18-year-old girl by a group of 5 men perpetrated during the Sanfermes festivities in Pamplona in 2016. The first sentence convicted the 5 defendants for the crime of and led to wave of protests across the country. The review of the sentence by the Supreme Court raised the sentence of 15 years for each convicted and qualified the fact as a which is the commonly known as rape. At that time, the legislation distinguished between abuse and aggression depending on whether they had been violence or intimidation, leaving some victims more unprotected in some cases, as in the case of young boys or girls, or people who had been chemically injected, or women who had not defended themselves. The Ministry of Equality took up the clamor of the streets and promised to eliminate the differentiation between abuse and aggression, which gave birth to a rule that brings together these two old crimes, establishing a series of mitigating and aggravating factors. Most courts have interpreted that if the sentence that has been imposed is within the new range, the sentence should be maintained, while some have interpreted that if the defendant has been sentenced to the minimum penalty and now the minimum penalty is less, that sentence should be reduced. Montero stuck out his chest about the rule. The only yes law is solid and comprehensive and allows the state for the first time in pioneering way, as the European Parliament itself is recognizing, to offer the comprehensive protection that women who are victims of violence are entitled to receive at a press conference. However, Montero clarified that they are working for a correct application of the law. She said the next, "We share the concern that Spanish society also has for these judicial decisions of sentence reductions that do not correspond either with the degree of the prosecutor's office or with the law itself of the only yes is yes, or with the spirit and will of the legislator." This is the first case in which the sentence has been reduced. The defendant was sentenced for the minimum for the crime of abuse, 8 years in prison. With the entry into force of the new legislators, lawyer requests this change to the new minimum. Thus, the order of the Civil and Criminal Chamber of the High Court of Justice of Madrid, to which Onda Cero has had access, states that the minimum penalty provided for in Article 183.1 and 3 is 6 years imprisonment, which is why, in accordance with the provisions of Article 2.2 of the Penal Code, the penalty is more favorable to the defendant. So it proceeds to the review in the sense interested on the defendant. Sentence reductions to which the prosecutor's office does not oppose complies with the new law, which changed the range of the crimes with the aim to contemplating the different scenarios of the crime and convert all concept in the. This implies that the range of the crimes is opened and the penalties are changed. In practice, this had meant the first downward revision of penalty, which many voices blame on an error in the new text of the legislation. The possibility of lowering sentences is due to a gross error of the legislator, who forgot to include the usual transitory provision that limits the cases of possible review of sentences. Says on Twitter Jose Maria de Pablo, criminal lawyer and professor at the Faculty of Law at the University of Navarra. Equality sources assure on the Zero that the problem is not the news freedom law, since this is a case in which a father, his stepdaughter, and in this case the judge has not considered Article 181.2, which established the same penalties as the previous law. This penalty range from 5 to 10 years approximately. For this reason, they insist that a degree cannot be lowered as the Madrid court has done. Then there is the prevalence of a situation of superiority, cohabitation, or kinship. They also warn of the risk of a macho justice as reported by the Committee of the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. But could other sentence reductions be applied in cases such as La Manada? Despite the version of the equality, experts insist that the first case of sentence reduction is a precedent for other similar cases. Onda Zero has had access to 20 judicial reviews that have led a reduction in sentences for rapes, a fact predicted by jurists and already pointed out in an interview in Más de Uno by the Attorney General Álvaro García Ortiz. Each case is each case, but it is possible that there will be a review of sentences. It is true that there had been changes in sentences, and it will be necessary to give us a necessary criterion. It is foreseeable that the prosecutor's office will soon issue a circular in which they will give light to this type of review that will be more favorable to the defendant. That has occurred in the case of Madrid, in which the prosecutor's office did not oppose the above. But I think that is really important to solve the cases, because there are people in jail that really did terrible things to minors and women, and they need to be in jail. But let's remember that the gender ideology tried to have a sexual liberty and try to awake the minors in this kind of field, because they say that Irene Montero said that the kids could have relations with the person they want. But I thought that it's really important that they have his formation in family, because family is the nuclear center of the political system. The politics starts in family, and with the family have union and have his different kinds of roles. We are more stronger like a society, because if you are an individual alone, it is more easy that they can take you, they can control you, and if you are with your family, you are more stronger. I thought this is really important, and it's very important to teach our kids to respect each other. If someone says no, it is no, and not to lie to get something, inculpate someone of something he didn't did. And I don't like the Ministry of Equality of Spain, because I think this is very radical, and I don't like the ideology they wanna teach our kids in the school. That's the worst thing. And the Ministry of Equality is responsible for proposing and executing the government's policy on equality and policies aimed at making equality between women and men real and effectively eradicating all forms of discrimination. And this is not being done in any way. On the contrary, they are harming women and minors. And I think all this ideology is destroying our society because our kids will not thinking by themselves. They have the choice to grow up with his family, have a normal infance and a normal childhood, and when they grow up, they can decide if he likes something traditional like heterosexuality or something another ideology. But that's personal. It don't have to be imposed by your government. Your government have not the power and the right to teach your children about gender ideology because they are your children. You are responsible from his education, and he has the responsibility to decide what he really wants. But when he grow up, because they are kids, they are children, they don't think really about this. I would really like to know in the comments what do you think. If you like, I will love if you give me thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and share to get more people. Thank you very much and see you next time. Bye. 泣いちゃダメでも本当